We are live. Hello and welcome. I'm excited again to be here for another behind the scenes. Today, I'm really excited to be chatting with Amanda Miller, and Amanda is a self-publishing consultant. So, Amanda, welcome and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we're going to launch into the overwhelming world of self-publishing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for having me. So I'm a self-publishing consultant with a company called My Word Publishing. And so I guide authors through the whole process of self-publishing. So from production into publication and distribution. So a little bit of what that looks like when authors come to us, they might just have a manuscript and say, hey, how do I self-publish this book? And as you know, there's a lot of different people in the line of professionals who you can get involved. So from cover designers, book layout designers, editors. So at My Word, we are kind of the liaison that gets you to the professionals involved to produce a professionally self-published book. And then also help you with publishing it and getting it out into the world. And we even have some marketing consultative services as well.
Awesome. And so we're kind of here today because we've been gathered here today because exactly what you said. So more and more people are considering the self-MD hybrid, right? Just basically we'll call it the non-traditional route of getting a book published. But what they learned, or what you and I know and how you and I have come together, is it is not a straightforward path. There is no one way, there is no right way. And so I think one of the things we're going to talk about, kind of taking a high level approach to what are some basic things people need to understand if they are, considering doing this. So I think before we even go into those, we kind of have those three key marketing strategies. Let's talk about self-publishing is overwhelming, right? What, if anything, Amanda, is there a typical self-publishing candidate, right? Like if somebody's thinking about it, how do you help them decide, or have they already decided when they come to you if self-publishing is the right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when people do come to me, I do go through the different publishing models that are alive today. So the past 10 years, self-publishing is just kind of, entered the space. It's booming. But with that comes, a lot of people who are trying to take authors' rights and royalties. So with the different publishing models, right, we always think of the traditional model where we're pitching to a big publisher and they take your rights and, you have to split royalties. In some cases, you get it in advance. It's great. I think if you're a writer who, we all have that dream of being in, HarperCollins, right? But it takes a lot of time, right? So you might not get published for years. You have to go get an agent, and then the agent goes to the big publisher. So there are some negatives to that approach. And then there's other models, right, where they take your rights and your royalties. So self-publishing, if you want to keep your rights and your royalties, you want to make a great book and you want to get it out into the world in a timely manner, self-publishing really is for you. And a lot of authors are finding that they're getting more royalties out of self-publishing than if they went with a traditional publisher.
Right. So there's a money consideration, there's a time consideration, and there's a control situation. And again, trade-offs on either one of those. And I think the other thing I keep sharing with people and learning, and I'm sure you explain as well, is there's a spectrum, right? There's the one end where literally you're all on your own. You can just load that manuscript up, a PDF, if you will. I mean, you could literally load up a PDF and distribute it, right? Versus the very other end of the spectrum of the traditional route, the agent, and everything that you've just described. But in between those two is just a complete spectrum, and kind of a huge spectrum of options kind of all along that way. And I think that's where you come in and have been incredibly helpful, because I kind of came from working with people in the traditional publishing world, but as that is getting disrupted, it's been great. So we're going to talk about these kind of three key marketing strategies, and this is really like you're at the beginning of your process. And you're mapping this out and you're thinking about this in a holistic manner. So what is the first thing you like to tell people in terms of things that they should have known or things they should know before they get into this process?
Okay, so when they first start out, like you said, it's overwhelming. So, you'd never, as an author, you don't really know when to do certain things at what time. And, do you get your ISBN, after the cover design, before the cover design? There's all these different pieces along the way where if you do it incorrectly, you might have a self-published book that doesn't really look professional and looks like it's done by an amateur. So, if you can get somebody like me who's a consultant, streamlines the whole process for you and you're along with the journey, or you can do it yourself. And if you do it yourself, you're going to have to do a lot of research. And I'll be honest, before I was self-publishing consultant, I tried that journey myself, tried to figure out, how to self-publish on my own. And wow, there were bumps along the way. So, the first thing I would tell people is, do you have the time to research how to self-publish yourself? If not, and you want to kind of, give that off to somebody, then I would definitely recommend finding a self-publishing consultant.
Yeah. And I think then what you and I talked about sort of in advance is, again, self-publishing. People's like, I can do it all by myself. It's great. But if they've chosen to go down the self-publishing route, they have a consultant or don't. You have mentioned, and you and I think both feel really strongly about two key players that an author should bring into their team that is, are hugely impactful in terms of making their book a marketing success, right? So let's talk a little bit about those two key players in addition to thoughtful, helpful consultants like ourselves, right?
Definitely. And, people ask me all the time, where should I be spending my money? Because it's not, the most inexpensive endeavor. And where you really should be spending your money at first, is with an editor and is with a cover designer or a book layout designer. I mean, all three of those, very important. Why? Well, an editor is going to make sure that your book is structured properly, reads, fluent, nicely. And especially if you need a proof editor, right? You need to make sure you don't look like you don't know how to spell things correctly. It's like the last line of defense. So editors, oh gosh, make sure you get a good one, and make sure you find one in your genre, who's really good at what they do in that genre. It's not just
a friend who, is good at editing.
Right. And then a designer, so we have cover designer and we also have book layout designer. Sometimes that person does both. Sometimes they only do one or the other. My suggestion, always find somebody who is, a professional who does this for a living. Hopefully they have a marketing background, so they have that eye for marketing as well as that aesthetic eye. And marketing, we kind of mentioned this a little bit together, but marketing starts with that production piece, that cover design. People do judge a book by its cover. That's real. And we need to make sure that, hey, when I look at a book, I'm at a glance, I know what genre it's in. So I don't want to be looking at a children's book and it looks like a nonfiction book. It doesn't make any sense. Or, what trim size are we choosing? It has to make sense for the genre. I think people often, we take these things for granted. We don't even realize when we look at a book, all the things that our brain is processing for us to read it.
And that makes it, to your point, a lot more marketable. And I think one of my other video interviews was with somebody who literally, this is George Siemens, and he specializes literally in book marketing. And it is but to your point, like, who knew there were specialists in this, right? So it's not a matter of just going to hire your friend who does good graphic design. Like, it's not a matter of just hiring a designer. There really is kind of a thoughtful process that goes into the designer. And I think to your editor point, again, we could go down a rabbit hole of the 2 to 3 to 4 different types of editors you could hire for your book, but just a general editor who you said, who's done this before, they worked in your genre, and they're truly an objective set of eyes who will understand how to make your book better, as opposed to just, ideally it's more than just grammar. So hi, Holland. This is Holland Saltzman's great info. Can't wait to share as we get questions all the time from new writers and authors. So Holland is a bookstore owner in St. Louis. So, and I think I know, a budding author herself because she's my sister. So great question, Holland. Thanks for weighing in, and type in questions if you have them. So we talked about before you publish. So we've got your, a key team in, and they're helping you bring you, budding author, the product, kind of to life. So let's talk about Amanda, and this is really where our road's path, and I call you because it's a whole different science, but it's one of the biggest differences I don't think people appreciate in terms of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And so when you are in the middle of your publishing process, there are a lot of things that you can do to tell the world how great your book is. And so we talked about optimizing your sales page. So let's talk about what that looks like, both in terms of what they can do on their own content, but what they also can do on the booksellers' content, i.e. Amazon and others. I'm clear in case Holland's watching.
So again, like one of the great things about self-publishing is that you do have more control in some cases. And the control that you will have if you self-publish is, let's say you decide to publish your book on Amazon's KDP tool, one of the many, you can choose from. There's a back end to that tool where you can optimize and choose specific keywords and categories for your book to compete in the marketplace a little bit. And you can have a little bit of a competitive edge there with certain tools. So I specifically use what's called Publisher Rocket, and I can see what people search on Amazon, what's being searched more than others, and then I can go into an author's account and optimize it for them and be a little bit more competitive that way. And then Amazon also has different promotional tools as well, like an Amazon Author Central page. So any author who's up on there can have a call out page that showcases them as an author. But you should also be having your own showcase page right on your author website. Having websites, is key. You need to have it as an author if you're really trying to go out there and make something out of yourself. So there's all these different ways where you really need to be putting your face up there, promoting your book, and making sure you're really checking the boxes. It's kind of, I call it that foundational marketing. These are just basics before you really even, hit the ground running and doing all the other things.
But it's true. I mean, I do find that people don't necessarily put a lot of thought into these home bases that they're creating. And there's so many things that you could and need to do to make these kind of shine that then make everything else easy, right? And again, to your point, whether it's an author page or whether it's a book page on the author's website, we talk about, big general content and strategy that goes on there. You look at the Amazon page and can be optimizing, as you said, those categories, those keywords, that comp set. And again, this is stuff that's kind of the ground foundational stuff, no matter what you do. So if you then move into driving people back to that Amazon page or your author page or your book page, they're working for you. And, so all those efforts beyond those are kind of driving people back. And I think, are there any things, Amanda, just while we're talking about either the Amazon page or the sales page, that you see people either forget, or kind of a hidden secret or secret sauce of things that people either tend to do or not know about? I'm just curious from the Amazon sales page, as I'm thinking about kind of what goes on their website.
Well, I'll tell you this with Amazon sales page, and it goes back to, I'll pull a book out here, the back of the book, I call it the back of the book blurb. It's a huge marketing piece, right? People turn over their book and say, hey, I'm going to read this and it better really capture me. Otherwise, I'm going to the next book. Right. Same thing with the Amazon sales page. I see people put the description of their book all the time on there. And it's not optimized in the way that's going to capture people to read it. I want us to almost think about blog writers. Writers, they take little snippets of, a couple sentences here, then the next sentence. We're not looking at huge blocks of paragraphs of text, because we're often just going to go to the next thing. So I think if people could be a little bit more attuned to their Amazon sales page book description, that would be a really great, just next level. How are people going to read this book and perceive it? And you want to capture them even right there. And then again, optimizing their Amazon Author Central page so that when we click on, your author name, It shows up with, you can have a blog going.
Right. I'm always amazed when those are empty. I'm like, oh my gosh, missed opportunity. Like such a missed
If you
opportunity.
have editorial reviews, you can put them up, by big publications. There's ways to also have all your reviews there too. So definitely, optimize these things.
Yeah. And I think, again, you and I are both huge fans of making sure people are asking for and getting reviews, organically and verified, but also even those ones that are coming in, that didn't make necessarily the back of the book, or, that are powerful. That's again where I say, well, that's where you can control that process on your own page, right? In terms of sharing those. Or did you do a book trailer? Or, are there other bits of content that don't have a home? You've created that home,
Exactly.
to drive people there and, give them more information. Or maybe you're running a pre-order, campaign. And again, whether you're doing something paid with Amazon or back to your own page, it's, you've created that really significant, and powerful home base. So what we also tend to see is there's the, okay, focus on the book, but, got the manuscript, tidied it up, got a good design, published it. And then there's just like, okay, I have my book launch. And there's this kind of micro or intense focus on book launch week or month, or, just I'm in the middle of book launch, right? Like it's just this constant, and the traditional publishers, I would say, have also, though, gotten us thinking that way, because it's kind of the 2, 4, 6 weeks before, 2, 4, 6 weeks afterwards. And then it's like, okay, you're done. And you and I both talked about sort of another really important thing that especially self-published authors need to think about is after you've published, you got to move beyond that kind of, 12, that sort of 2 week, 4 week, 6 week hit, right? Can you talk a little more about that?
And that is okay. So, and I'm sure you've seen this as well. Writers want to write. They don't want to do book marketing. And if they do, God bless them, because it is stressful. And so one of the ways I try to, calm my authors down a little bit is say, hey, yes, you're going to have a book launch and it's going to be these 2 weeks, 6 weeks. But guess what? Your book launch, if you need to extend your timeline to about a year, you're going to be working on this book marketing little by little. And I always say a good rule of thumb is doing 2 book marketing tasks each week for a year, and working on chipping away at that little by little. And I don't want them to be overwhelmed with all the things that they could be doing, because book marketing is such a huge topic. A lot of authors, they need a team, right? They need from, day one, right? You have your editor, your cover designer, maybe a consultant. You have your book marketing experts who are good at maybe social media, who do email marketing, website design, right? The list goes on. It's definitely stressful. But if we can, extend our timeline, say, hey, we're going to actually be working on getting this book out into the world for about a year. So we just need to look at this week. Maybe we do need to look at a month out, but little by little, we don't need to overwhelm ourselves with all the things we could be doing. Let's just choose a couple key areas, and specifically where your target audience is hanging out, and let's work on those places.
Well, and I've also seen, especially in the nonfiction world, right? Like somebody may be an expert in a certain topic, and guess what? There's typically National Blank Awareness Month, right? So, we just start thinking about, like, thoughtfully the, okay, let's just not put all of our eggs in this launch basket. And launch is important, right? Like launch is important in terms of, Amazon, or the other sellers seeing like, okay, this is a hot book, or, oh, there are a lot of reviews coming in, and there are things to be concentrated on those. But I think, to your point, thinking longer term is really important. My one question to you that I find also, authors would rather be writing, right? And a lot of times it's very hard for them to hold space for writing or editing their book, while at the same time you and I are urging them to be thinking of getting this stuff set up and getting some of these foundational pieces and starting to think about the strategy, even if they haven't published yet, because it's never too soon, right? Like the sooner we can start putting this timeline together, the better. In an ideal world, if they're contacting you, when do you think is the best time to reach out? Like wherever, in terms of their book journey or their writing journey, Amanda, I'm curious to see what makes the most sense for you.
In terms of the publishing end or the marketing end?
I think in terms of I think where they start to overlap in terms of when they should start thinking about and implementing marketing tactics, right? Like, or do you kind of start, say, I think more in terms of the marketing end.
Okay. Yeah. So I ideally, if an author's up to it, I would like to get them into a marketing consultation. I would say after they have finished their cover design, because marketing can now begin a little bit more explicitly. So back to I think my original point is there is pre-publication marketing that is to be done. So would ideally like somebody to say, hey, yeah, my book's going through cover design, or it's just finished and I'm ready to take on a consultation about, what I can start working on. And then I like to, as to not get them overwhelmed, I like to break up consultations when it comes to marketing throughout the process. So maybe one pre-publication, one's after the book is published, and then after, and then a little bit after, maybe, I don't know, a month or two out. So we can kind of break up what you could be doing at each stage, so that it's not just an information overload.
Yeah. So I want to go back. So for those of you either just joining, or for those of you who are listening and slowly processing, which I'm not always great at that either, in terms of just thinking about marketing or kind of big picture marketing strategies, before you publish, we can't stress enough, hiring an editor and a designer are just key people to have on your team. It just makes all your marketing efforts better. Amanda, when you publish, optimize those sales pages, right? Whether you're figuring out how to work with Amazon, or you're doing it yourself on your author and your book pages on your own, websites. And then after you publish this marketing, thinking about your marketing timeline in a much longer horizon versus the short focus on launch solely. So Amanda, I would say, as a person who works both in the self-publishing consulting space and then transitioning in the marketing space, which is such a lovely bridge that you bring to helping self-published authors, how do people connect and find you? And we'll make sure to put all this stuff in the show notes.
Sure. So I am on the mywordpublishing.com website. I'm under the team, it says Amanda Miller. So you can always get in free 30-minute consultations all the time with me. Or I do have an email. It's amanda@mywordpublishing.com. And I'm always on it. So if you ever need me, have a question, you can let me know there.
Perfect. And then Amanda, also, I know, we've overlapped, or we call each other because you also sometimes are available to help people, like after you've created the strategy, to actually help with implementation and execution too. So I want people to say, well, I've already got my strategy, but sometimes I'm looking for help. I just want to give a shout out that Amanda's a great person who actually understands how to get some of the things done in a strategy for authors who, may be experts or off doing their next project, who can't, be all things and actually execute all their marketing plans, right?
Yeah, so I do have some, marketing services that I do on the book end, but I also, after your book is out, I can also do social media strategy and management. And sometimes I'm also kind of a marketing consultant on certain PR calls. So I'm pretty flexible, and I really like to work one-on-one with authors and really hone in on their brands.
Awesome. Well, selfishly, I was excited to get to have this call because you and I, every time we talk, we get all excited and we're like, oh yeah, you could do that or that. So I love where our worlds cross over, but I know my world is a greater place for you being in it. So when people really are in the self-publishing, you have that expertise. So I love being able to sort of connect them with you. And I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today. So Amanda Miller, she's self-publishing consultant with My Word Publishing. We'll put all the details in show notes wherever this ends up being published. Reach out to either if you have any questions about being seen, found, and heard as an author. Thank you again, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Bye.